Hey, good people. So, there are probably an infinite number of reasons people love gardening as an activity and gardens as a place, but I'm going to spare you that list and just give you my top three reasons why I love to garden. So, first of all, gardening has introduced me to all sorts of kinds of new people. So, one thing you got to know about me is I love meeting new people. I love learning people's interests and passions, their stories, their strengths, their challenges, and just all of those things. But it can be kind of hard to do that when you don't have a reason per se. Like, I can't just go up to a stranger and be like, so tell me your life story. Like, I could, but people might look at me a little bit funky. So gardening kind of takes the pressure off of new encounters, at least in my case, right? People come to gardens, especially community gardens, for a wide variety of reasons. Some people are looking for a quiet space to do some weeding or to just get their body moving. Some people are learning how to grow their own food and are looking for people who have experience doing those things. Other people, like students, are often just trying to fulfill a requirement for community service. And whatever the reason people are at a given garden, whether it's in a community setting or maybe a personal home setting, like they're there. People are there. And over the past 4.5 or so years, I've been to dozens of different community gardens and even more like personal gardens of friends, family, strangers, like clients, things like that. And I find that people have all these different reasons, but we're in this shared space. And I love that because I get to ask questions like, like what brings you here? Why are you here? And that's how I found out about all those different reasons. And I get to find things about myself, like, maybe I do want to spend more time with my hands in the soil and my knees bent over some, vegetable bed. And, I get to see people at different stages of life. One of the most common groups of people that I have found in community gardens is retirees. And as someone who recently graduated, I wasn't really spending a lot of close time with elders outside of like my grandparents. And so I go to a farm or a community garden on a Saturday or even in the middle of the week if it was the summertime. And I'd get to talk with like some elderly lady who's been retired for like 10, 15 years and we're just chatting. And gardens at least have been that place for me. So I love them for that. My second reason for loving gardening is that gardens always teach me something new. So aside from people, just the process of gardening is just a constant education, right? Like the principles of gardening are generally applicable regardless of the size and shape of a given garden. You're gonna need some of the most basic things. A reasonable place to put plants. You're gonna need access to water. You're gonna need nutrients, which usually comes in the form of soil.
So this third bed, which is
trying hydroponics or some other form. You're gonna need sunlight or artificial light, but usually sunlight. You're gonna need a way to deal with pests.
at the end of my day.
And you're gonna need time. You don't need a whole lot of time, but you do need time to tend to your plants. But beyond those like very broad categories and needs, no two gardens are the same. And that means you might find something that works for one person or a group of people in one place, and you try to apply every one of those steps in another place, and it doesn't work. And that also means gardening is often a game of trial and error and trial and error and trial and error. And that means a whole lot of learning. But in addition to the trial and error of everything, plants also have like their own peculiarities, their own personalities, their own traits, strengths, and weaknesses. Like, for example, there's this combination of plants that is often grown and has roots in indigenous Native American history called the Three Sisters. So you've got corn, beans, and squash. And they're grown together because they like to grow together. They benefit one another. The corn, which grows real tall with its stalks that are kind of sturdy, will give a space for the beans to wrap around and have space to grow, right? So the corn's providing this really stable base. And then the beans have nitrogen fixation capabilities, meaning they can grab nitrogen from the air because of some of the bacteria on their own roots, and they bring it from the air into the roots, making that nitrogen available to the corn and the squash. Now, here's the thing about nitrogen. Nitrogen is a super, super, super important nutrient for plants. In the same way that you and I need, to make sure we've got our proteins, our carbohydrates, and our fats, plants need nitrogen. And so the beans taking it from the air and bringing it into a form that corn and squash can use is super helpful. And then the squash likes to grow out horizontally. So instead of vertically like the corn and the beans, the squash are growing out like this. And when squash in as many varieties grows, they often have these like pricks on their vines and on their leaves, and that deters pests that would try to eat the beans and the corn. So the three of them are working together in these ways and in other ways that I'm not going to go into to be companions. And indigenous people all across North America figured this out, and they were able to grow these things together. And that's so dope to me. That's so freaking cool. And because it's so cool, I'm going to share a link in the video description describing the process of Three Sisters planting. But on the other hand, in the same way that there's plants that love to grow together, plants be beefing with one another, right? As an example, one of my favorite fruits, top 5 all time, and it's not 5, mangoes. Mango trees have a characteristic called being allelopathic. When I first learned it, I was like, allelohuan? Is this an Eminem term? No, allelopathic, which means they inhibit the growth of other plants. So mangoes, like some other plants, will release certain chemicals in their roots, which inhibits or restricts the growth of other plants that are growing near it. And you're thinking, or at least when I learned it, I was like, why would they do that? Like, why would the plants be beefing? And it's survival of the fittest. It all goes back to survival of the fittest. Mangoes, among other plants, developed the ability to release chemicals so that they could outcompete for nutrients. Shoot, and if I was like staying in one place for the entirety of my life, I would like to maximize my access to food too. So, that's amazing. But in both of these cases, right, the Three Sisters and mangoes, that's an education. That's new. Like those are things I didn't know or learn or come to appreciate in a classroom. I learned those in gardens. I learned those like trying to understand what makes certain kind of plants grow and thrive and vibe and what makes them less happy. And finally, third, I love gardens because they connect me to something greater than myself, right? Every single time I spend time in a garden, I'm reminded that there are like literally countless forces of nature that make that individual garden possible, right? We've got every different plant species that people choose to grow, whether it's herbs or flowers or fruit trees or vegetables. Each of those have their strengths and their weaknesses and their challenges and their peculiarities. And they inherit those from like literally billions of years of evolution. All of that is in play when you're in a garden. And those traits, right, the weaknesses, the strengths, the challenges, the peculiarities, those connect to many different kinds of life that aren't present in that garden. And for me, that's so dope because I'm reminded of survival of the fittest in this small place. And I'm also reminded that in each bit of healthy soil, there are millions of microorganisms that are living, from fungi to bacteria to things that I'm not currently remembering and can't be bothered to remember in the moment. But there's these like things that we can't even see unless we have a microscope that are in the soil making their own lives, doing their own thing. And they are part of this ecosystem that slightly bigger beings like the insects and the worms and all these different bugs that we can see are also interacting with. And no matter the size of a garden, like it's all kind of a little ecosystem. You've got your plants and your soil and your insects and your bugs, and sometimes you got birds that are dropping off poop in the garden, and then the poop is actually nourishing the ground, and then the worms are eating the poop and turning that into something that the soil can use, and then the soil is going into the freaking plants. It's like, what? It's a whole bunch of cycles. And then on top of that, in addition to the little ecosystem, we've got broader forces of nature. We've got the water cycle with rain coming in, or if there's an aquifer under the ground, or there's a river. We've got the sun and its light and its heat, the wind carrying all manner of things from just air to different seeds and debris, and the forces of gravity bringing everything down, and so many other things. And when you step into a garden, all of that is at play. Right? I mean, maybe I'm the only one who's geeking over those things, but even if it's like one little container bed that's the garden, or if it's like a big homestead, or if it's even a farm, all these different forces are at play. And to me, that is such a magnificent reminder of what I believe, what God makes possible, and the infinite creativity of the creator of this universe. So, yeah, that's really what I find amazing and inviting and super cool about gardens. I love that it connects me to new people. I love that gardens are always teaching me something new. And I love that gardens connect me to things greater than myself. So, till next time, we'll work on the outro. Still haven't figured that one out, but hope you enjoyed the video. Peace.